Deterrence AI, the leading blog in proactive security.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We all want to keep our digital lives safe and secure, right? And in 2025, that increasingly means we need to get smart about artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. AI security solutions. There's so much information out there, and it can be tough to know where to even begin.
It really can.
Our mission today is to cut through the noise and give you the key insights from a really fantastic article we came across all about using AI for better security. By the end, you'll have a clear understanding of what really matters when it comes to choosing the right AI for your defenses.
I think that's a great goal. And it is a really critical moment,
Yeah.
We are seeing this huge increase in how sophisticated cyber threats are becoming. And AI is really at the heart of it. It has this incredible potential to protect us. But attackers are starting to use it too.
Wow, so it's almost like AI is...
A double-edged sword.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So the article starts by laying out what it calls the essential features of an optimal AI security solution for 2025. What are the absolute must-haves, in your opinion?
Well, the article really nails it when it says threat detection accuracy is the cornerstone. And what makes AI so powerful here is its ability to learn from these massive data sets,
Right.
And then they adapt to the evolving threats in a way that older systems just can't. Like the traditional rule-based systems, they just rely on these predefined signatures of known threats.
So they're only as good as the threats we already know about, basically.
Exactly. But AI, on the other hand, it can learn the patterns of malicious activity, even if it's never seen that exact threat before.
It's like instead of recognizing a specific bad guy, it can recognize the way bad guys tend to act.
Exactly.
Even if they're wearing a new disguise.
You got it. And that brings us to a really critical point. The balance between minimizing false positives, those annoying alerts for perfectly harmless activity,
Like the ones that drive security teams crazy.
and false negatives, which are the actual threats that slip through the cracks. A good AI solution, it's constantly learning and getting better at telling the difference.
Which is so important. Because
Okay.
you don't want your team wasting time chasing shadows, but you also don't want them missing the real thing. The article then goes on to highlight behavioral analysis and anomaly detection. Can you explain why those are so important?
Yeah, so those are the capabilities that allow AI to find those really tricky threats like insider attacks, where someone within an organization is abusing their access,
Oh, wow.
or zero-day exploits, which are brand new vulnerabilities that haven't even been publicly disclosed yet. The AI basically builds this dynamic baseline of what normal behavior looks like across all your systems and networks, and then it flags anything that deviates significantly from that norm.
So it's much more proactive than just waiting for something we already know about to happen.
Right.
Okay, moving down the list of essential features, we have response time. I mean, the urgency there is pretty self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, especially when you think about how fast these threats can spread and the damage they can cause. One of the most powerful things about AI security solutions is their ability to provide automated incident response.
So that means...
They can quickly isolate affected systems or even neutralize the threat without waiting for a human to step in.
So AI is basically acting as the first responder.
Exactly. And when you're dealing with cyber incidents, every second counts. The faster you respond, the less damage the attacker can do.
Right, because they have a much smaller window of opportunity to, say, steal data or disrupt operations.
Precisely.
Makes sense. Okay, the article then talks about integration capabilities. Why is it so important for these AI solutions to work seamlessly with the security tools that we already have in place?
Well, if you think about a typical security setup, you probably already have things like a SIEM system.
SIEM, for those who don't know.
That's a security information and event management system. It basically collects and analyzes security logs from all your different devices and systems. And you might have threat intelligence feeds from various sources. Right. Seamless integration means that the AI can pull data from all of these different sources. And when you have all of that information in one place, it gives you a much more complete picture of your security posture.
So instead of having all these different systems working in isolation, you're breaking down those silos and getting a unified view.
Exactly. That better correlation of data means more accurate threat detection. And it makes your security operations so much more efficient because you have a single place to analyze everything.
Right.
Plus, it helps you get the most out of the investments you've already made in your existing security tools.
Makes total sense. And then we have scalability. With data volumes growing exponentially, that seems like another non-negotiable.
Absolutely. Your data is only going to continue to grow, and your security solution needs to be able to handle that without slowing down. AI-powered solutions, especially those that are cloud-based, they often have that scalability built in so they can adapt as your needs change.
Okay, and last but not least, the article mentions user-friendliness, which might seem less technical, but I can see why it's important.
Yeah, you need a system that your security team can actually use.
Right.
Even the most sophisticated AI is useless if your team can't understand what it's telling them,
Right.
or if they can't easily manage the configurations or generate the reports they need.
Okay.
A well-designed user interface makes the whole system much more effective in the real world.
Okay, it's like nobody wants a black box making critical decisions that they can't understand or influence.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the fundamental features. But how do we know if an AI security solution is actually performing as it should? The article talks about critical performance benchmarks.
Right. So here, we're moving from what it can do to what it's actually doing. And the cool thing is that we can measure the effectiveness of these AI systems using quantifiable metrics.
Okay, let's start with the false positive rate. We touched on it earlier, but why is keeping that rate low so important?
A high false positive rate leads to what we call alert fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, your security analysts get flooded with so many irrelevant alerts that they start tuning them out, and that increases the risk of missing a real threat.
Makes sense.
The machine learning in AI, that's what helps the system get better at understanding what's a real threat and what's just noise. And over time, that helps to reduce the false positive rate.
So it's like the AI is learning to focus on what really matters.
Right. And then you have the false negative rate, which is arguably even more important from a security standpoint.
That's the percentage of actual threats that the system misses, right?
Exactly. And you want that number to be as close to zero as possible. That's where the real danger lies.
Because that's when a breach can actually happen.
Right. And that's why it's so important for the AI to be continuously learning from new threat data and updating its models.
So it can keep up with the attackers.
Uh-huh.
And then we have detection speed. I mean, it seems obvious why speed is important, but what does AI bring to the table in terms of speed?
Well, AI is incredibly good at analyzing huge amounts of data really, really quickly.
Okay.
And that means it can spot those malicious patterns and anomalies much faster than a human could, or even a traditional rule-based system.
Right.
And that faster detection leads to a faster response, which is crucial.
Makes sense. The article also talks about the ability to handle sophisticated threats. What kinds of threats are we talking about here?
So we're talking about things like advanced persistent threats, or APTs.
Oh, yeah.
Those are long-term targeted attacks that are usually aimed at specific organizations. And then there are zero-day exploits, which we talked about earlier, and polymorphic malware, which can change its code to avoid detection.
Wow, that's
Yes.
tricky stuff.
Yeah. So how does AI help us defend against those kinds of threats?
Well, because AI is so good at learning, it can recognize those subtle patterns and behaviors that are associated with these sophisticated attacks.
Even if the attackers are using new techniques.
Okay, the article also mentions some benchmark studies like ARC-AGI-2 and performance comparisons of AI gateways. How should we be interpreting those kinds of evaluations?
That's a great question. It's important to understand what each benchmark is actually measuring. Some benchmarks, like ARC-AGI-2, are broader tests of general artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay.
They measure how well an AI can solve a variety of problems. Performance comparisons of AI gateways might focus specifically on how efficiently the AI can process data.
Right.
And then there are reports like the OSP LLM Top 10 and the Generative AI Security Solutions Landscape.
Okay.
Those focus specifically on the risks that come with new AI technologies, like large language models.
So we shouldn't assume that a high score on one type of benchmark automatically translates to better security performance.
Exactly. You really need to understand what the benchmark is measuring and how relevant it is to your organization's specific security concerns.
Okay, so now we have a pretty good idea of what to look for in an AI security solution and how to measure its performance. But how do we actually go about choosing the right solution? The article talks about navigating the market.
Yeah, and this is where a structured approach is so important. You don't want to just pick a solution because it sounds cool or has flashy marketing.
Right.
It needs to be a strategic decision.
Okay, so where do we start?
The first step is to define your specific security requirements.
So,
What are the biggest threats you're facing? What kinds of data are most sensitive? Are there any compliance regulations you need to meet, like the Australian Privacy Act?
Which has some pretty strict rules about data security, right?
Exactly. You really need to understand your organization's specific vulnerabilities and obligations.
Okay, so once we've done that initial assessment, what's next?
Then you can start evaluating different vendors based on the features and performance benchmarks we've been talking about. How well does each solution address your specific needs? How well does it integrate with your existing systems? How scalable is it? Is it easy to use?
And we also need to think about how we want to deploy the solution, right? On-premises, cloud-based, or a hybrid approach.
Exactly. Your IT infrastructure, your security policies, your long-term goals, all of those things will influence which deployment model is best for you.
The article also recommends looking at case studies and testimonials.
Yeah, those can be really helpful because they give you real-world insights from other organizations that have already implemented the solution.
So you can see what worked for them, what didn't work, and what challenges they faced.
Exactly.
And I would imagine that requesting a proof of concept is pretty important before making a final decision.
Absolutely. A proof of concept lets you test the solution in your own environment with your own data.
So you can see how it performs in a real-world scenario.
Exactly.
And finally, the article emphasizes the importance of the vendor's reputation and reliability.
Right. It's not just about the technology itself. You want a vendor that has a good track record, that's known for innovation, and that provides excellent customer support.
Because you're essentially partnering with them for your security.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the current landscape, but cybersecurity is constantly evolving. The article touches on some emerging trends that are shaping the future of AI security solutions. What are some of the key developments that we should be aware of?
One really interesting trend is the rise of agentic AI in security. These are more autonomous systems that can make decisions and take actions on their own within certain limits, of course.
So they're basically,
We're more independent.
yeah, which could be really efficient, but it also raises some questions about control, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. There's huge potential there, but we need to think carefully about how we manage and govern these systems. We're also seeing attackers using AI more and more to create more sophisticated attacks.
So like,
Things like highly targeted phishing campaigns, more intelligent malware, and automated attacks.
so it's becoming an AI arms race, basically.
In a way, yeah. And on the defensive side, we're seeing the emergence of things like AI-powered co-pilots.
Okay.
They're like AI assistants that help human security analysts work more effectively.
Yeah.
They can help them analyze threats faster and make better decisions. And overall, the trend seems to be toward a deeper integration of AI across all aspects of security operations.
The article also mentions zero trust for AI. What does that mean exactly?
It basically means that we can't just assume that the AI is always right. We need to have mechanisms in place to verify and validate what the AI is telling us, especially when it comes to making important security decisions.
So it's like extending the principles of zero trust to the AI itself.
Exactly.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
What are the biggest opportunities and challenges when it comes to using AI for security?
Well, the opportunities are really exciting. AI has the potential to dramatically improve our ability to detect and respond to threats. It can automate a lot of the tedious tasks that security teams have to deal with, which frees them up to focus on more strategic work. And it can help us be more proactive by identifying emerging threats and predicting attacks before they happen.
Those all sound like huge benefits, but what about the challenges?
One of the biggest challenges is data quality.
Okay.
If the data that's used to train the AI is flawed or biased, that can lead to problems.
Right.
It can lead to inaccurate or unfair outcomes. Integrating AI solutions into existing IT systems can also be a challenge.
Especially in larger organizations that have a lot of legacy systems.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of explainability.
Right. We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Some AI algorithms are so complex that it can be difficult to understand how they reached a particular decision.
The black box problem.
Exactly. And that can make it hard to trust the AI's judgment, especially in critical security situations.
Right.
And of course, we also need to be mindful of ethical considerations and data privacy, particularly in light of Australian law.
Makes sense. Now, the article has a section called Vendor Spotlight, which highlights some of the leading AI security solution providers in 2025.
Yeah.
Could you give us a quick overview of some of these companies and what they're focusing on?
Sure. So you have companies like Sentinel Alone and CrowdStrike. They're really focused on endpoint security, and what's called extended detection and response, or XDR.
Okay.
They use behavioral AI to detect threats on individual devices and respond to them.
Okay.
For example, their AI can analyze the actions a piece of software takes to figure out if it's malicious, even if it's not something they've seen before. Then there's Darktrace.
Got it.
They're known for their self-learning AI. They basically create what they call a cyber immune system that can detect anomalies across networks and cloud environments.
Wow.
Fortinet, they integrate AI-powered threat intelligence into all of their products, whether it's network security, endpoint security, or cloud security.
Right.
They use AI to analyze tons of threat data and proactively update their defenses. And then you have Google Security Operations.
Right.
They leverage Google's massive data analysis capabilities and their cloud infrastructure to provide really robust threat detection and response.
So a pretty diverse set of companies with different approaches.
Yeah, and as the article points out, there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
The best solution for you is going to depend on your organization's specific needs and its risk profile.
Okay, let's go back to those benchmark studies for a minute.
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways that we should remember when we're making decisions?
The main thing is to look beyond the surface level.
Okay.
Don't just focus on the overall score. Really try to understand what the benchmark is measuring and what it means in the context of your organization's security.
Right.
Like, AI security trend reports can give you a sense of how much confidence there is in AI's ability to defend against new threats.
Okay.
Research on AI gateways can tell you about the potential performance benefits of specialized hardware and software. The ARC-AGI-2 benchmark reminds us that evaluating AI is complex. And reports on things like OWASP LLM vulnerabilities show us how important it is to have solutions that can handle the risks that come with new AI technologies.
So it's all about understanding the nuances.
Exactly.
Okay. Now for the really practical part. The article lists some essential questions that we should be asking AI security vendors. What are some of the most important questions that our listeners should ask?
Some of the key questions are, is the AI built into the platform, or is it just an add-on?
Okay.
How transparent is the AI's decision-making process?
Right. The explainability issue.
Exactly. How does the vendor address potential risks and biases in their AI models?
Okay.
How scalable is the solution, and how will it adapt to future threats? How does the vendor ensure that my data is protected in accordance with Australian law?
Right.
And what is the total cost of ownership and the expected return on investment?
Those are all excellent questions. So looking ahead, how do we make sure that our security stays strong as AI keeps evolving? The article talks about scalability and some other long-term considerations.
Yeah, so scalability is still really important.
Okay.
You need a solution that can grow with your organization. And you need a solution that can adapt to new threats and new AI technologies. Right. You should also look at the vendor's roadmap to see where they're headed in the future. And it's really important to remember that AI security is an ongoing process.
Okay.
It's not something you set and forget. You need to be constantly monitoring, evaluating, and adapting.
And what about the financial side of things? What should we be thinking about when we're evaluating the cost and ROI of an AI security solution?
You need to consider all the costs, the upfront costs, the ongoing operational costs, and the costs of training your staff.
Right.
You need to do a thorough total cost of ownership assessment.
Okay.
And then you need to look at the potential benefits.
Such as?
How much could you save by preventing a security breach? How much faster could you respond to an incident? Could you reduce your overall security costs? And what about the intangible benefits, like improved reputation and customer trust? A good ROI is essential for any security investment.
So it's about weighing the costs against the potential benefits, both tangible and intangible.
Exactly.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, I think the key takeaway is that choosing the right AI security solution is more important than ever.
Okay.
We've talked about the essential features, the performance benchmarks, the emerging trends, the opportunities, the challenges,
Right.
how to evaluate vendors, and the importance of thinking long-term.
Okay.
To make the right decision, you need to really understand your organization's needs, do your research, ask tough questions, and always be thinking about the future.
Okay.
Ultimately, the goal is to build a more resilient and adaptive security posture that can protect your organization in the years to come, especially here in Australia, where we have our own unique regulatory environment.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks so much for walking us through all of this.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
And for our listeners, as AI becomes more and more integrated into our security systems, we have to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that we can trust those systems?
It's a good question.
How do we verify that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? That's a question that's going to shape the future of cybersecurity. So we encourage you to think about the things we've discussed today and maybe do some more research on the vendors and benchmarks that are most relevant to you.
I think that's good advice.
This is really just the beginning of a much larger conversation.
Absolutely.
So keep learning, keep asking questions, and stay safe out there.
Sounds good.
We'll see you next time.
See you then.